All right. Hello, hello, and good evening, everyone. Good evening to my very special guest, Dr. D. We are talking about trauma tonight. And for those of you who are watching us and joining us, who will watch the replay, I'm Shanae Cartwright, success strategist, founder of Triple B Effect, Brains, Beauty, and Business, where we empower women of faith to be the best version of themselves so that they can have a greater impact and increase in ministry and in the marketplace. And today I have a wonderful woman of faith, woman of God, who is credentialed, and she comes to share in her experience as well as her knowledge and expertise concerning trauma. So I have Dr. D with me here today. She's going to share a little bit more about herself, but I just want to share with you just a brief introduction for her. She's a great woman, a great just background, and she can give us a great example or great understanding of this word of trauma. And so Dr. D is affectionately a preacher's kid. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and the owner of Come Alive Coaching and Transformative Services. Her Psych and Spirit Ministries is also found on YouTube. She has a YouTube channel, and it focuses on helping people reclaim the territory of their mind to live triumphantly. And what we're going to do today is be talking about trauma so that we all can recognize it, identify it, and learn how to live triumphantly. But I want Dr. D to introduce herself on a little bit more intimate level so that we can get right into our discussion. Dr. D, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. So hi, everyone. I am Dr. D. I am a clinical psychologist. I'm here today with our sister to talk a bit more about trauma. So I do quite a bit on the truly psychological side of the house, insurance and all that kind of stuff, true sessions and services. But I also really, really love coaching. I just found that is usually the easiest way to really incorporate my faith, which is that of a Christian, with the tools that we need psychologically to move forward and recover. So I absolutely love what I get to do in terms of coaching and also consulting with churches and helping to empower people to understand we are mind, body, and spirit, right? And so we can't attend to one without attending to the other. And so often it can be taboo, right? To think about one's mental health. Physical health, we're kind of okay with, but mental health, not so much. And so I love being able to break that stigma to remind folks that we are absolutely all mind, body, and spirit. And so we have to attend to all of those things. So I also, like our sister shared, the Lord has entrusted me with a ministry called Psych and Spirit. And that really just came about because there has been zero psychological concern, whether it be like anxiety, depression, trauma, bipolar, any sort of true diagnoses or symptoms to which the Bible does not have the answer, truly. And so I really was like, why are we keeping these things in silos? Why are we going to church or going to a counselor? Why aren't we doing both together? Because that's how God created us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me, from the purely clinical psychological side of the house, all the way over to the ministry side of the house, and then the coaching and consulting kind of in between.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And so as you all already have heard, she comes with a depth of knowledge and understanding of her expertise in her field. And we want to jump right into the conversation. So I love how you shared in the introduction that you talked about how, the church and ministry, we're in silos. The church and the practice, rather, are in silos. And you talked about this holistic approach, mind, body, and spirit, which, yes, that encompasses everything in who we are. And it makes sense to address everything. I don't want to say a one-stop shop, but I don't know how else to put it. Why should I have to shop around?
Exactly. Attending to the whole,
Yes,
right? The whole human
the
that God
whole.
created us to be. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Awesome. So we're gonna come back to that, but so what I think is becoming and fitting is for Dr. D to tell us how you got into this field of psychology, becoming a psychologist, and dealing with trauma specifically.
Sure, absolutely. So for me, trauma is kind of a second thing. First is the field, like you said, how did I get to the field? So for me, I feel like truly all of us have like a little extra special helping of our Father in us, right? Like some of us have his eye for beauty, and some of us have his ability to create art and all those sorts of things. And I really feel like my extra special helping is our Father's heart, right? So he designed me to feel very deeply and to care very fully for people. And I didn't really know what that looked like, especially in the African American community. When I was thinking about jobs and I was thinking about how I can help people, I was really told, do nursing, do teaching,
Mm.
but psychology, it's not a real job, right? It's kind of what I was told. And again, I'm a little older than I appear, so this was a while ago. But yes, so for me, I knew that I had kind of a heart that broke for people, and I couldn't figure out exactly where to go or what to do with that until the Lord really brought a teacher into my life in high school who steered me in the direction. And she was like, have you heard of psychology? Do you know what this is? All of that. And so that started me down the path. So after I got into the field of psychology, of course, I had to do the bachelor's, the master's, the doctorate degree. One of the things that I noticed in my work with folks was that no matter what was going on for them, and no matter how much I wanted to help them, I was always hitting a roadblock. I was always hitting something. It's like we were kind of playing whack-a-mole with symptoms, right? They would say, I'm not sleeping, and we would whack that mole, and they'd say, well, I have really tough patterns of relationships, and we would whack that one, and they'd say, oh, well, I feel really stressed out and anxious, and we would whack that one. And I got tired of feeling like I was playing whack-a-mole, hitting all these random symptoms, and the people were just coming back and coming back. It was helpful, but I was like, what is the root, right? And so I have always been a Christian, and I've always had a relationship with God. And I remember praying to him, like, God, you gave me this heart for your people. And I know that you brought me to this field. I can't understand why the things I've been trained to do and why the standards, right, in our field keep kind of hitting this wall. People are feeling better, but they're only feeling so better for so long. That actually brings me to why I integrated our faith too, but that's another story. So I kind of was pulling on the tether with Jesus, and I was like, hey, help me pull to the root of this thing, like all these symptoms, but let me grab each knot and just keep yanking until we can't go anymore. And I tell you seriously, like 99% of the time, all of those symptoms we were whacking at, the common thread was trauma.
Wow.
It was trauma. If I tugged long enough, there was something that happened in folks' childhood. There was something that happened in high school. There was something that happened in military service. There was a sexual assault, a disconnected parent, a church hurt, a something. There was always something. And I
Something.
was like, that's where I need to work. I need to know how to pull until we get to that something and how to actually help them heal that.
Wow.
Because once we can do that, we're not whacking at moles anymore. We've pulled it out at the root, at
At
the
the
source.
root. That's
Mhm.
good. That is
Yep,
good. Wow.
absolutely.
I love it. Love it. Okay. So you shared a lot right there. And I do find, even in my field, in my line of work, that a lot of people are living through trauma. They're living through past trauma. And you would be surprised how many people are dealing with childhood trauma. But I want to back up real quickly. I'm curious to know, can you give us a simple definition of trauma, just in case somebody who may have lived through an experience and they don't even realize that I've lived through trauma? And I think there are more people than what they know that are actually have survived some traumatic experience.
That's a great question. I absolutely agree. I think what people don't realize is that a lot of individuals who experience trauma don't actually go on to develop PTSD. And
Mm,
so a lot of times people think if I don't have a PTSD diagnosis, I haven't been through anything traumatic, which is absolutely not true.
mm,
So the easiest way, when I explain what trauma is, it's basically like you were living life one way, something happened, and it didn't go back, right? There's still some residue there. I was able to talk to people right before something happened, and now I'm fearful. I was able to drive right with no problem. Something happened, like a horrible car accident, and now it's different. If there was an event that you know that happened in your life, life was one way before, it's a different way now, and you can't quite figure out how to get it back.
Hmm.
Or if you even can go back, there feels like there's a residue from that impact.
Hmm.
That impact, that is the trauma, right? That's what trauma basically boils down to. And it leaves its mark, psychologically on us. We think, of traditional PTSD symptoms, but it leaves its mark physically,
Mhm.
right? And you're like, oh, I walk into this room and my heart just starts like racing and I start sweating and I don't know what's going on. But
Wow.
you had a past interpersonal trauma. That's a trauma response, right? You're still able to walk into the room, but that is a trauma response. It didn't happen before. Something happened. Now it's happening. That would be a trauma. And it
Mm.
also impacts us, emotionally and spiritually, which is a whole nother thing. But the simplest definition, you're living life, something happens, and things you can't quite figure out how to get back to where you once were, or if it's even possible. It's
Mhm.
very likely that it was a trauma.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, and that self-explanatory and that, yeah, something that changes, something that causes an impact or a great change. And so
Absolutely.
we're faced with this trauma, and this is something that has happened to us that is completely new.
Mhm.
So we're living through life, and most of the time, unless you've had life experiences, you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to live through it, or even you keep reliving it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
can you tell us maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about your experience with trauma now and how you came to find those tools and resources, or how do you want to approach that? Just so
Sure.
that people can understand the relatability that you have even in this topic, because I'm a firm believer in we become the teachers through our own life experiences sometimes. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I agree. I'm a firm believer. It's like you can speak to something, right? Um, but sometimes there's a little more power. Like you can stand 10 toes down on that thing when you've been through it, right? When you've had to claw your way through it. And so absolutely, I would not even be shocked or surprised if the Lord didn't have me go into the field of trauma knowing what was going to be around the corner for me. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because I feel like in helping people for so long, I had a certain amount of head knowledge. And I did the best that I could. And I hope and pray that it was impactful. But it wasn't until my own trauma hit
Mm.
that the way I treat trauma completely transformed.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things with being a licensed clinical psychologist in the purely clinical setting is for the absolute most part, should be a relative blank slate. And so, while I was able to serve people better after my own trauma in the clinical setting, I wasn't able to truly be free to pray with them, to point them to scriptures, to guide them, which I found was the only way I got through my own trauma.
Mhm.
So basically what happened was in 2018, I remember previously before that, remember something happened. So before trauma, right? BT, right? Before my own trauma,
Mhm.
life was one way. I was doing good. I was fine. Everything was good. 2018 hit and everything in my life turned upside down.
Mhm.
So post-traumatic stress disorder, I would say would be not fully accurate for what was going on, but I definitely had an acute stress reaction to everything. And then I also had some post-traumatic growth, which people forget about, right? And so I'll talk about both of those things. But I was going on in my life in 2018. I was actually married at the time. I've since divorced. I was
Mhm.
married at the time. And that started to fall apart for various reasons. And I won't go into a lot of details, but basically not I don't ever grade trauma. It wasn't a simple growing apart, right? There were some incidences that led to a pretty rapid, challenging split, right?
Mhm.
So that was going on. At the same time, 2018, I had a new job. I had a new baby. I had incredibly limited resources because at that time I had to cover all the bills while on maternity leave and I had to pay for a move and do all of that stuff. My resources were limited. I moved to a new place. I had no friends. I had no church home. I had family, which was a godsend. But when you look at your life, I went from literally one day having a husband,
Mhm.
having a brand new baby, having money in the account, having friends, having a church home, having a job that I was comfortable with, a decent commute, flip it and like literally, breaking up the marriage, a new, relatively newborn baby in my arms, limited resources, no place to live, right? A new job I was not familiar with, a ridiculous commute, an increase in bills, no friends, no church home. Everything about my identity, and we'll, if we continue talking, I'm sure we'll get to identity with regards to trauma, but everything about my identity was ripped away immediately and suddenly and painfully. And I was to the place where I was like, God, if you can hear me, because now I'm even questioning that, right? Remember, I said we're mind, body, spirit. Trauma does not impact only one. So when we're going through a significant trauma, one of the things that can really happen is our spiritual health can crumble if we don't know who to turn to, which is why the church is so important, right? So at this point, I'm like, God, if you're even listening, right? If you care, your daughter's down here struggling, God, I'm crawling around. Like, I feel like spiritually, I'm laying on the ground with my shield of faith over me and I'm just taking the blows, like, and
Trying to take cover. Wow.
yes. I'm just gonna hang on. And I'm like, God, if you hear me, if you care, if you're listening, if you could do anything, you have to help me. I have nothing left. I've tried everything that I know to do psychologically and everything else, and I've got nothing, right? And so for me, that was the point where while I had the head knowledge of how to treat trauma, I now have the lived knowledge as well. And I have the lived experience for folks who have dealt with divorce, single parenthood, financial stresses, having no place to live, having like all of these traumas. God was like, I'm gonna go ahead and give them to you all. He didn't do that. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and help you get through all of these at one time, right? So that you can know how to heal from this thing. And so, like I said, I was laying there and I remember one night, like I was so crushed and devastated because all that stuff gets happening. Not only physically as a human am I struggling, but spiritually, I'm like, do you hear me? Are you listening? Do you care? How could you let this happen? Why didn't you protect me? Do you love me? Are you a good father? What's going on? All that stuff, right? And so that was absolutely probably the lowest point of my life. And I remember I was laying in the bed all by myself, just crying physically and crying out with my heart to God. And I was like, God, I'm done. I'm like, if you have to say something, you have to do something. I can't hang on. And I picked up my Bible, tears all up and through here, picked up my Bible and I opened it and it said, it was Ezekiel 37. And at that point, I had been churched my whole life. I had never heard of the Valley of Dry Bones. That's not a scripture. Yes. So I remember I was so traumatized. I picked up the phone and I called my mom and I said, hey, Mom, I opened the Bible, Ezekiel 37, dry bones. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because if it's a bad thing, I'm not even reading it. I can't take any more hits.
Right.
If God's like, yeah, this is like 40 years of trauma. I'm like, no, I'm not reading this, right? She was like, it's a good thing. Just read it, right? And so it was in the midst of that. And for folks who haven't read Ezekiel 37 if you're going through. But basically, the name of my company comes from Ezekiel 37. So God told Ezekiel to prophesy, right, to the dry bones. It wasn't a dead body, it was bones. There was nothing left. And it wasn't just bones, they were bleached from the sun. They were dead. There was nothing there. And he prophesied and he had Ezekiel speak to the bones. And, God breathed his breath and the bones came to life and it was an army. Talk about a comeback story, right?
Yeah.
So that's, yes. So that's actually where the company came from, Come Alive. It's based off Ezekiel 37. So my experience with trauma, it was devastating. It was hideous. It was horrific. Those are usually the words to describe trauma. This isn't little, oh, that kind of hurt. Trauma will level you, right? If you're not careful. So it was the most hideous time of my life. But it was also the time that the Lord used to birth something new in me, to give me a brand new identity, to give me a new heart, to draw me closer to him. And so my company and the ministry that the Lord has entrusted me with, that is where all of that was birthed from. Before that, I mean, I was like, thank you, Lord, for my food. Like, I knew him and I was like, he's around. I read a scripture a day, keep the devil away, all that good stuff. But I know my father, you know what I mean, now. And so for me, that's what my trauma was, right? And that's what God, not me, has, because if it was me, I'd still be laying on the ground with my shield of faith, like balled up. But that's what God can do with it. And so trauma it's something I wouldn't wish on anybody, but in God's hands, it can really turn into something beautiful on the other side. Really. And people lose sight of that because their identity can get wrapped up in it, and it's hard to move on. But long story short, that's my trauma and kind of how it's continued to inform and change my career and my trajectory.
My heart is just bursting. And I mean that in all sincerity and all seriousness. And I thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being transparent. I think as people of God, we certainly have to become more transparent with what God has brought us through, because there are other people who are going through things that may be similar. And sometimes because of shame, embarrassment, and that these are all works of the enemy, we would rather go and recluse and hide ourselves. And again, that's the key thing, hide ourselves, when God says that he is our refuge and we take shelter in him. But my heart is just bursting because of what you share and the power of it. And what hit me is when you talked about identity. Now, I know this wasn't a part of our
let's do it
set of questions. But yeah, we have to go there because in the field that I work in as well, Dr. D, I experience a lot of traumatic experiences with people indirectly, the loss of loved ones constantly. And one of the number one questions that I receive when I work with people and I hear their stories and I can't say testimonies at this point, but when I hear the traumatic experiences and the events that are unfolding in their life, people often say, if God loves me, why is this happening to me? And people question their faith. They have doubting beliefs at this point because they feel as though if God is who God said he is, why am I going through this? Why me and why now? So they're talking about who they are to God. They're talking about the timing. Why is this happening to me? And I know we can unpack that for probably days. but what I want to focus on, what you said that really spoke to my heart, and I'm praying, and I know it will speak to somebody else's heart, because somebody is questioning their relationship with God. Somebody is even questioning who God is and if God exists because of a traumatic experience that they have had to go through. And it has made them question who God is, but it's also made them question their identity. And I want you to talk about that. And maybe this is what I got from it when you were talking. Experiences come and they shape us, sometimes for the better, and then how people handle it, sometimes for the worse, if we allow it. Who was Dr. D before the traumatic experience? How would you share your identity versus who you became after the resurrection of those dry bones? My God.
Yes. Absolutely. So one of the things that you notice is a complete difference. So what you said was, you're like, I'm so glad you were able to tell your testimony. Like, that's so meaningful and that's so beautiful. And Dr. D before that would have never told anybody anything that I was going through for a few reasons. One, I was socialized, like, you kind of keep your family business, like, what's going on? You keep it in the house, like, not in a bad way, but just keep that over here. But then coupled with that, on top of that, is all of the psychological training. So we're trained to be a blank slate. We don't let anything out. I'm here for you to give me all your stuff. I help you unpack it, repackage it, repurpose it, and I send you on. I'm not in the mix, right? And so in coaching and counseling and anything that I do with anybody, I'm never in the mix. I still don't say, hey, let's talk about me. But I will say it shaped me to hide all of who I was and to present the most neutral, palatable version of myself at all times. I was stressed out. All the time. I was always stressed out. I was anxious. I had great attributes too. Like, I was kind and loving and all that kind of stuff, but people don't believe it when I say it, and it sounds like a cliche. I am better now than I ever was before all of that stuff happened. And I never would have guessed that, because at one point I was like, God, if you created me to endure all of this, why did you even create me? Like, why did you send me down here if this is what life was going to be? That's how frustrated and overwhelmed and just horrible I felt in the midst of all of that. Who I am now, totally different person. So I've had people describe me as peace. Someone at my job actually said that. They were like, anytime you walk into the room, they were like, there's just this peace. That's not me, right? That's God. Obviously, they don't maybe recognize, but they're like, there's a peace. They're like, it feels like you just kind of float and you are like a ray of sunshine, right? I'm not tooting my own horn, but I am saying that to say I have more peace now because of God, right? Where I used to be anxious and wound up. How can I stay safe in this world? How can I keep anyone from getting too close, from hurting me, from, anything like that? It's like, all right, God, you got this. Let's go. I'm right behind you. I'm in your shadow. I'm under your wing. Go ahead. Go ahead. So there's a peace, a freedom that comes with that, right? And the fact that, the Bible talks about, the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, right? If God did all this for me, who in the world would I be to sit on that and to not give that to a brother or sister who I can say, hey, look what God did. Your heart's broken. You don't have money, single parenting, you're out of a job. You need, guess what God can do? I can tell you firsthand, and we can go to the Bible. Let's do both of the things, right? So I'm so much more calm, relaxed, joyful, peaceful, and so much more certain, because I literally, rather than having to fight my way through everything all day and present this image and be this person and stay safe, because trauma really impacts your sense of safety and your ability to trust people, including yourself and your own judgment, right? Instead of having to do all that and basically be my own God, which we don't realize that is what we're doing, right? It sounds harsh, but that's what we're doing. I dethroned myself and I said, God, you be God. I'm gonna be back here.
That good. Oh, that's so good. Wow. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's just, I'm so much more free now, I think, than I ever was. And I don't, again, God can do all things. And I'm sure I would have gotten to a place where I would have asked him. But in the old life, the way I was living, I was in control of everything. I was taking care of everything. I was leaning on my own trust. I didn't necessarily have the desperation to seek after him and to ask him, or to even consider, how do I get to a place where I just cast it all on you? So in my own old life, I don't even know how I would have gotten to the place where I'm like, God, thanks for the life. Do what you want with it. Let me know when you want me to do something. I'm gonna be over here laying down, right? I don't know how I ever would have gotten to that. So yeah, old Dr. D, new Dr. D, they're not even remotely close to the same person. And there is still some residual, right? Like I still get triggered if certain people behave in certain ways or do certain things, or, that sort of stuff. I'm still a human. I have scars, right, around some of the interpersonal trauma for sure. But 98% of me,
yes,
better exponentially, right? So I'll take the scars. I'll take
praise God. Praise God. I mean, that's just a breath of fresh air, just amazing. And something that, we know that God has all power. God is sovereign. God can do what God wants to do. And we know that God can intervene. But in this situation, there were some things that happened. God was working behind the scenes, but perhaps God was working behind the scenes in a way that we weren't expecting. And I'm so grateful of your testimony and how you were able to take that trauma and live a triumphant life, as you say now that God has allowed you to do. And I hear it. So it's so freeing, and it gives me hope. It gives me hope for so many other people. And so what I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to hold you too much longer. This is so good.
You're fine.
I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for your time and presence and sharing tonight.
Absolutely.
So yes, ma'am. Thank you. So when I'm thinking about trauma, and you mentioned about the residuals. Now, that's a big issue that I know a lot of people deal with. And you talked about the triggers. I have people in my life who have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder from military and other events in their lives. And then in your defense, you have gone to counsel, you've received the help that you've needed because you're in that field. Can you give someone direction? And now that they have disclosed and they understand, I'm dealing with this trauma that I didn't even know I was dealing with. I'm holding it. I haven't dethroned myself yet.
Mhm.
How do I deal with this residual? Where do I go? What do I do? And we're speaking still holistically. So this is for the believer. This is for that person finding faith who is maybe just in the beginning of their faith. And they're like, God, why has this happened to me? And I don't want this question to be overloaded, because I know people do that where they ask like 30 questions in one question. I'm catching myself. So my question for you is, again, how do people deal with the residuals of trauma? Can you give us some steps or some practical approaches to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the way I would probably try and boil this down in the most digestible way possible, for folks who are believers, whether they're newer to Christ or they feel like they've been getting to know God for a while. None of us have ever arrived, but you might feel like your relationship is progressed. Or people who don't even know God. Like if you don't know God, first step would be just be like, hey, God, I'm curious, right? And just ask him, just see what he says, see what he does. Because honestly, no matter what, with regard to the psychological interventions, which I'll talk about, they don't stick but for so long. And that sounds like I'm like dashing water on our entire field. They're fantastic. But even if we think about the term self-help, it means I myself have to keep powering and cranking that thing in perpetuity, right? So I'm going to give you some tips that we can do for ourselves, because God loves it when we partner with him. But for those of you who do have a relationship with Christ, I would say the very first step is to honestly invite him into the journey, even if it's with rage, because that's how I invited him in, with rage. I was like, God, I am mad, right? I've never done anything to deserve this. I served you. I know you, right? Take a look at the book of Job. That's where I started. My mom was like, oh goodness, she's gone off the deep end. Like she's really having a time.
Oh my God.
Let's start with the book of Job. Seriously, you don't have to read the whole thing, but Job gets preached as he lost all his kids, he lost all his cattle, he lost everything. He never cursed God. He got everything back double portion. That's the book ends, right? Job had like 20 some odd chapters in the middle where he was having a whole moment and a half, and God still favored him, right? God said that he's what would he say? Like he dealt favorably with him, right? Like even though he questioned, he was like, God, if I did something, come down here, put me on trial. Bring somebody, bring them from the north and the south, bring all the witnesses.
Yes.
Job had a moment, right? And so again, God said that he loved. That's how we do this, Job. You can ask me these questions. I might not give you the answer you're expecting, but we can talk, right? So Absolutely. Go to God. That's step one. Even if it's with rage, even if it's with tears, even if it's with doubt, even if it's with an ugly cry, go to him. And one of the things that I had to do, especially with my heart, because I was carrying so much bitterness at that point. It wasn't full out rage. I was kind of pushing it down. So it was bitterness. Talk to him about your heart, right? Ask him to give you a new heart. Ask him to sit with you and fellowship with you. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then don't toil. Let him do it. He'll work that out, because I still couldn't tell you how he did it, because I was like, do it with fire this time, God. Like, when I say bitter, like,
wow.
So step one would be take it.
I had those moments too. Like, yeah, God, I need you to do this.
Yes,
quickly now.
Fire.
This way. Yes. Burn it up. Yes. Show your wrath. I'm a child of God.
Yes. He said, fight my battles. I just have to be still. I request fire this time, God. Right? So yeah, that would be step one. Take it to him, no matter how ugly, how whatever, be authentic and take it to him. Some practical things that you can, and that's exceedingly practical, but some things you have control over, right? You give it to him. He does it how he wants. Some things you have control over. Remember, we're mind, we're body, and we're spirit. Yeah. And so when we've had a trauma, it impacts all of those things, mind, body, and spirit. So think about it this way. Think about your body as kind of being a system, right? You've got a head, you've got a heart, you've got hands, okay? So the head, that's how we think about things. So when I have had a trauma, my thought process is going to start to change. Where I once thought people were okay, they're fine. Now I think they're not to be trusted. They have an ulterior motive, right? Where I once thought I'm a pretty decent human, now I'm filled with shame and abandonment concerns or whatever the case may be. But my thoughts start to shift. Now my thoughts, and the Bible backs this up. My thoughts, those are obviously going to impact how I feel. So if I'm thinking things like the world is unsafe, or even like God doesn't care, or I will never be the same again, or I'm disgusting, or whatever the case may be, that's going to impact my heart, how I feel. Yeah. I cannot think those things and feel like that's no problem. Let's start the day. No, okay, that's going to have a whole situation. I'm going to feel shame, sadness, rage, whatever. And then what I feel, that impacts what I do. None of us are like feeling clinically depressed and we're like, all right, time to kickstart the day. Let's get some stuff done. No. Right. No. We're like trying to lay on the couch and eat a Snickers bar and watch TV and cry, right? So our head, what we think impacts our heart, what we feel, and that impacts our hands, what we do. So if we want to start thinking about how do I try and manage trauma's impact on me, I need to be mindful of what I'm thinking, right? Am I waking up every morning thinking, here we go, right? Is that the first thought when I get up? No shame in that, but be mindful of that, right? You want to start to understand, what am I telling myself repetitively throughout the day? Am I noticing that I feel a certain kind of way? I'm just feeling down and disconnected and sad all of the time, right? That would be a heart thing. Be mindful of how you feel. If I notice that I'm doing things that are not going to lead to my best life, right? I sat on the couch for 3 days and ate as many carbs and sugar and whatever as I could get. Now I feel bloated and I feel even grosser and I feel whatever. Am I doing things that don't help? Am I isolating myself? Am I not going to church? Am I not praying? Whatever. Pay attention to those things. And what I would recommend for folks is start where you have the energy, right? Where you have the energy, where you have the desire, because the good news is it's a chain reaction. So if I impact any part of the chain, if I change the pattern in any way, it's going to impact everything else. So if I just take a hold of what's going on in my head, and maybe I start to journal my thoughts, and maybe I find scriptures to challenge those thoughts and say, hey, when I think this, that is not the truth. I really need to be meditating on this. If I have the ability to do that, go for it. We don't always have the ability. Sometimes we're too low, but if I do, go for it. Because now if I think things like, God has a plan for my life, right? Versus he's not listening and doesn't care anyway, that's going to impact how I feel. God has a plan for my life. I'm sad at what happened, but like, I'm curious, right? What's God going to do? How's he going to help? That's different. That's a shift. That's a change in the pattern. Now, if I feel a little bit different, I'm going to do something different. So if I'm wondering what's God going to do in my life, I might actually start to look to see where he's working. And I'm going to see it because he's always working. So boom, that changes my thoughts even more. That makes me feel even better. I do more things and we have broken the cycle. We're off in a better direction. Everybody doesn't have the ability to do that at the same time. Like they might be feeling too down, in which case, fine, don't start there. Start at your heart, right? What are you feeling? Am I always feeling down and depressed and stressed out? Then I need to push as hard as I can through that and do something, anything that changes how I feel. So it could be going for a walk, even if it's a short one. It could be watching a comedy on Netflix. If all the energy I have is to lay, at least I can lay and laugh.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
It could be anything, right? But do anything that's tiny. It's going to change how I feel. Maybe I felt depressed on a level 10, and now I only feel it on a level 6. And that's just enough energy to do something different, right? Now I can go take a shower. And when I take a shower, I think, okay, I'm feeling better. I think, right? I think. So now I have broken the pattern and we're off in another direction, right? So start with how you think. If you can't, start with how you feel. If you can't, start with what you're doing. Feel like trash, but do something better anyway, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Grab a scripture, listen to a podcast, sit outside. You don't even have to move. Just sit outside and let the sun, right? The vitamins, take that in. It doesn't matter what it is, but do something. Break the pattern and it will start you spiraling in a different direction, right? Instead of down, you're going to start moving up. But always, if you can, if you have a relationship with God, start with him, because he'll give you all you need to do any of that. And then when you're doing that, he'll help you sustain it. He'll help point you in the right direction. He'll be doing background work you don't even understand. Why don't I want them to die with fire anymore? Oh, okay, that's God. I'm healed. I don't know what happened. I don't know when that happened, but hey, how you doing? You know, so yes, give it to him. But if you can't, remember, trauma impacts your head, your heart, your hands. Start somewhere. Start somewhere.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love that analogy. And I love the fact I'm big on alliteration.
Yes.
Anybody who knows me. So that's a great way to memorize the work that needs to be done and how we can prioritize just our health, and then making sure that God is fully involved. Our head, our heart, and our hands. That's so easy that a child could get that. I love it. I love it. I think sometimes when people hear about doing the work, even the inner work, and I do a coaching, I think people, they're like, well, what does that mean? What does that entail? Is this going to be something that's completely difficult? Is it beyond me? I'm already feeling low, as you alluded to, on the couch, eating up sugar and carbs, things that make us feel good temporarily. And then we feel sluggish. And ladies, that's something for us to think about. Be careful with the carbs and sugars during that time. You know what I'm talking about. But I digress. I love it. I love the analogy. You all that are watching and taking notes, make sure that you pay attention to that, your head, your heart, and your hands, because when our head is not right, it affects our heart. And I definitely see how it can impact what we do with our hands, how we act out negatively, what we do. Very important. And it brings me to the scripture in the Bible where the Bible talks about be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I say that because when we don't think, when we don't stop to think and see what's going on and do a self-check, we are quick to act.
Absolutely.
With either our hands or our feet. In many cases, sometimes it's our hands. So that's powerful. I'm just so filled with what you're sharing tonight. Thank you so much. And then just to kind of, as we wrap it up, you are a great gym. I don't think, yes, you are a great gym. You're a woman, you're a doctor, knowledgeable in your field, your craft. And I know that God is opening up doors and opportunities for you in this field. What we've seen over the past 2 years has definitely been traumatic in itself. Everybody can say that they've experienced some type of trauma just in those 2 years in itself. And so no one can say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, whether directly or indirectly through loss or someone else experiencing the loss. It just impacted us in so many different ways, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, being exhausted, even on the job.
Physically.
Yes, everything, holistically, we were affected. And so now we're in this place where I think, I shouldn't even say think, and I am a thinker. I know emphatically that the church realizes there's something that we need to do differently. As you mentioned earlier about the silos, there is something that we need to do differently concerning our approach to trauma, mental health, to counseling. We're specifically talking about trauma tonight. Real quickly, I want you to just share with me, the conversation, or how do you introduce the conversation to our churches where we understand how important this is, and we're not just playing games. This is people's lives that are at stake. Their souls are in the balance. And you have people who are certainly who are angry with God, and to some degree I can understand that with some of the things that they've experienced. So how do we start that conversation with the church and the local churches?
Absolutely. Church leadership, church membership. What are you thinking?
Just the church leadership, yes, because going to the church, you're going to address the church leadership, of course. And so, yes, going into the church leadership so that the church leadership can see how vital it is to talk about subject matters such as this and bring in professionals.
Yes. Yeah, so I would definitely say the fantastic thing is God has gifted all of us differently, right? And complementarily. And so I think where it used to feel like, pastors were the sole holders of the weight of the flock, right? By themselves. I think God is now really reminding the church that all the gifts have a place, right? And so if he's given someone the gift of mercy, or he's given someone, compassion or understanding, or he's given someone training, right, in this field, that it's not two completely different things. You take care of that out here, you take care of this here. But really, God is saying, if I'm raising up my church, right, because it's God's church, if I'm raising up my church and I am empowering my people and I am sending them out here, right, to win souls, I got all the tools in my tool bag. I have everything any person could need. And so whether we're talking about tending to the flock in the church or going out and getting souls into the church, everything that we've been through cannot be ignored, just like you said. And everything that we've been through, the pastors have been through as well. And so gone are the days where the pastor is the superhero who just shoulders it all and just gets through. Pastors are human beings, and the staff is human beings. And so, not that I hope anyone would feel the weight of this, but the truth is they have all felt the weight of this as well, right? And so to continue to shoulder that is not really leading by example. If we continue to exclude those pieces in our church, what that's inadvertently saying is we don't talk about that here. If you've got a problem with that, then that's different than what we're doing here. And we don't talk, right. we don't talk about it. And in a way, it can invalidate the experience of so many in the flock and so many out there, right, in the world. And so it's one of the tools that we can use to show our members, not only do we see you and we want to attend to every part of who you are, but when we go out there and win souls, we're going to make sure that you're okay, and that the souls that we bring in here, we're stewarding the assignment that God has given us well. We cannot steward and shepherd the flock that God has given us if we can't tend to them. So we pull them in the door, but then what, right? Then what do we do? And if we're not careful, without realizing it, we can inadvertently hurt people, right? Because they're already hurting. The church is a hospital for the hurting, is really what it is. So they come in, and then unfortunately, either we don't talk about it at all, right? Or I say things that kind of hit your scars without realizing it. It would be kind of synonymous to someone going into the doctor's office with, high blood pressure. And the doctor talks about everything but that. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's fine, right? It's like, what message does that send? So it's so important to attend to the whole person completely if we want to get to their soul, because what people don't realize, and what sometimes church members or leaders sometimes don't realize, is that block I was talking about before, when I was like, I'm trying to help people but I keep hitting this block. It was trauma. But in the world of the spirit, right, in the world of God and in the church of God, that block is often trauma, and it's often shame, and it's often all of those wounds. And so if we don't tend to those, we can pour and pour and pour. We can throw scriptures and prayers and all of those things. It's the same block, whether it's in the world and whether it's not. And it's the same block whether we talk about it or if we don't. And so if we're really going to care for those that the Lord has entrusted to us, we have to be able to speak to all parts of them. And the pastors and the leadership have to be well themselves.
Amen.
Because pouring out like that is a lot, right? Like Moses in the wilderness, so he was like, why are these people around my neck? Like, I didn't birth these people. God, I'm tired, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Like, you're a human and you pour out and you give. That's a heavy weight as well. And so we want to make sure church leadership is well, and they have the tools that they need. And also, when we're loving on folks and when we're bringing them in, we want to make sure that there's nothing between them and God. And a lot of times trauma is that thing. And until we break that wall down, we're going to keep hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And it's like, why not just break the wall down? Just break the wall down. Help people make sense of this stuff so they can get to God. Because he's waiting. He's like, come here. I love you so much. And they keep knocking into their own wall of trauma. And so often it takes just a few words, a few prayers, a few scriptures, a little bit of turning of the heart. And it's like, wow, God did it. And now let's get to know him, as opposed to just hitting that wall for 50 years, 20 years,
Mhm.
15 years, whatever. Tear the wall down. Get
Wow.
him to God. Get
Wow.
him.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Amazing. Amazing. So you really opened up our eyes to a lot tonight. And one thing I'm going to say, and I want to ask you to get ready to prepare just some words of just empowerment or encouragement for anybody who is watching, who may be going through their own traumatic experience.
Okay.
They need to hear from you, not just because you are credentialed and a doctor, but because you're human and you've had your own human experience with trauma. But what you've brought to my attention tonight, just so many great nuggets, but definitely the body of Christ, the church, our leadership. I'm sure there are leaders who are walking around. So I'm saying this specifically to any leader or pastor who will be watching this, who are walking around dealing with their own trauma and pain. And they're trying to, as you said, they're trying to pour into somebody else. They're trying to pour in. And unfortunately, as the illustration that I've even seen myself, is that there are holes. There are holes in your clay. There are holes in your bucket. The
Yeah.
bucket that you use to draw water with to go to the well. There are some missing pieces there. And you take that same bucket and you take that pail and you pour into somebody else. But while you're pouring, you're depleted in a sense because you haven't received the help that you need. You're dealing with something that happened years ago, whether it was a traumatic experience at home, whether it was church hurt, whatever it was, even something dealing with your spirituality with God, and you have not received what you needed to receive. This
Mhm.
message is probably for you as well. And we want to pray that you receive what you need so that you don't continue to have holes in your jar.
Yeah, that's good.
Um, so I thank you for that charge to leadership, because leadership, they are the gateway. The word that I heard, they are the gateway. The shepherds lead the
Mhm.
sheep to the pasture and the flock. And if they can't lead them, or if they're leading them and we're going through terrains that we shouldn't go through sometimes. We're going in different areas because maybe there were some things that you didn't see. There were some blind spots that you didn't see within your own life, and things that you haven't really handled. But yes, that's really good. But I want you, because we have been talking for a while, and I want to wrap it up. This has all been good. The replay is going to be amazing. I thank you so much. Thank
My
you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. This is the needed conversations that we have to have. I just want you to, as we prepare to close out this session, please, in your own words, in your own strength, share with the people who will catch the replay, an empowering word for somebody who may be dealing right now with a traumatic experience, or overcoming something, or something from years ago. Please share with them some words of empowering truth.
Absolutely. So I would say for anybody right now, excuse me, who is going through trauma, who is trying to figure out, where do I start? Where do I turn? Will this ever end? It's been 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, right? And nothing has changed. The most pivotal moment for me was to let go of the why, right? To let go of, why did this happen? Why did God allow it? Why are these things going on in my life? To not get stuck there, but to really start to shift my focus on the who and the how.
Mm.
So instead of getting caught up in the why did God let this happen, shifting my focus to the who is He,
Mm.
right? Who is He and who did He create me to be? And once I had a full understanding of that, then the next question was, now, God, how do you want me to do this? And He led me every step of the way. I can't say this enough. There's nothing literally that I could have done in my own human strength, because I tried for almost 2 years by myself with my own skills, my own techniques, my own self-help, got nowhere. Right?
Wow.
So shift your focus away from why did He let this happen and being angry with Him. Take it all to Him. Look to Him. Get to know Him. Let Him restore your heart. Let Him restore your identity, and He will walk you through the how, because it is not as overwhelming as it might seem. A lot of that stuff He's going to be able to do for you simply because you came to Him, right? And you asked Him to do it. No work required. Some things, yes, you're going to have to do a little bit of work, but it's so much easier to shoulder when He's there, moving your hands and moving your feet and mending your heart and holding you up. So if there was nothing else that I could say tonight, it would be, even if you're angry, even if you're frustrated, even if you are defeated and you don't even know if your prayer is going to work, take it to him. Start there. And again, I don't go into all the details of my life because I don't want to distract people with my own story. But there are so many facets of things that I have been through in my life. Had no idea how I was going to get through them. I had no idea how they were going to leave that place in my heart, right? And how I was going to get restored. And he did it. So trust him, he will, even if you don't think so. Take it to him.
Wow.
Yep. Take it to
There
him.
it is. Take it to him. Take it to him. Coming from our doctor, but also a daughter of the Most High God. So we thank God for you. We thank God for you and your gifting. Where can they find you really quickly? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. They can find me on, if you go to Instagram, you can at Dr. So Dr. period D, come alive. So COMEALIVE. I had to think about it in my head. Or just go straight to my website. Everything you need is there. So www.comealiveservices.com. So any of those places you can find me. And I would absolutely love to work with pastors and church leadership and to help give them the support that they need. And then also, of course, individuals who are looking for support and care as well. So
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. D with Come Alive. She is our psychologist, well qualified and capable of the work that she is doing. And so we thank God for you. This is our session. As always, I like to say a mind change equals a life change. Please connect with Dr. D. Find her on YouTube, find her on Instagram, and comealive.com, Come Alive Services.
Yep.
comealiveservices.com, and she'll be more than happy to connect with you and get you what you need as far as resources or even coming as a guest speaker. So we have been blessed tonight, and I just thank God for you. So I'm going to sign off and look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sister. Have a good night.
You too.